Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, and happy Friday the 13th, the unluckiest day of the year. So just a warning, don't buy any lottery tickets today. Thank me later. Since it's Friday the 13th, I figured I'd give you guys a video themed after our good old boy Jason Voorhees. But since I've been working on so many videos at once right now, I only have time for a ranking video, but not just any ranking video. No sir, this is my personal ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise. All 12 films ranked with my additional thoughts, and yeah, as of 2022, there are still 12 Friday the 13th movies, not 13. In fact, 2022 marks 13 years since the last Friday the 13th movie was released in February of 2009. Very sad. Anyway, here's my ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise. Number 12, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Even a film like Jason Goes to Hell has its fans, but, you know, I don't care. The ninth Friday the 13th film, the first in the series made by New Line Cinema and the second sequel that claimed to be the last Jason movie, really fucking sucks. I know some appreciate the ninth film for trying something different as Freaky Friday the 13th, having Jason killed off in explosive fashion at the start, possessing random people from there, and you know, it would have been fine if it was a one-off gimmick, but in a lot of ways, Jason Goes to Hell really was the final Friday, before Jason went to space, fought Freddy, and got rebooted. The ninth film is terrible as a send-off of the franchise. A true final film should be a glorious celebration of what a franchise is, but Jason Goes to Hell does everything in its power to try to not be a Friday the 13th movie, while still passing as a Friday the 13th movie.
How you doing, you fat-ass, maggoty, blown-up fuck?
It also makes all the mistakes you really shouldn't make with a final film by throwing in a ton of new characters and lore that come out of nowhere. Jason is apparently a pure evil demonic entity, a deadite even. Not just a kid who seemed to drown, kicking off decades of misguided revenge, even beyond the grave. No, he was just always evil, Satan's spawn, I guess, taking the form of a demonic snake that lived in his heart, that not only can possess people, but can also be reborn from corpse vaginas. Okay. The ninth film also invents a sudden adversary for Jason, Creighton Duke, a bounty hunter who's obsessed with killing Jason off, and Duke is a cool idea.
What you think of as Jason is not Jason. That body he's wearing, that's just me.
But he's put to great waste, barely being in the film more than the actual Jason, played by Kane Hodder. And I gotta say, I think the ninth film's Jason looks the worst, but I also gotta say, he's got a nice ass. Adding on to Jason Goes to Hell's baffling ideas is an insane scene where we watch Jason shaving a naked man tied to a table before transferring his soul into said naked man's body. Why did Jason need to shave that guy? The guy before him wasn't shaved. Why did he need to shave that? Number 11, Jason X. A lot of people like to treat Jason X as the worst Friday the 13th movie just for sending Jason to space. But it's just not very great for the execution of the concept, not the concept itself. Jason X was made as a stopgap solution until Freddy vs. Jason came out, but its release got delayed and it ended up coming out a year before Freddy vs. Jason. Essentially, Jason is Wolverine, able to regenerate himself and unable to be killed, I guess. Not a body-swapping demon anymore. So the government endeavors to freeze the killer and let him be the future's problem, and he even gets a little company. Some explorers in the future discover Jason and his companion on the now desolate Earth.
How does he function with a brain that small?
Way manages.
That's very funny.
Making the smart decision of thawing the obvious murderer out, who wreaks havoc on the ship, starting with one of the best kills in the franchise, freezing a chick's head and cracking open a cold one with the boys. Savage as fuck! But that's basically the only highlight of the film. Jason X just takes its ridiculous concept a little too seriously most of the time, playing it straight and spending a lot of time on its sci-fi world building, but it all looks very generic, cheap, and it just becomes a distraction from Jason more often than not, instead of lending itself to Jason as the ideal, crazy sci-fi playground for him to do his thing.
I just saved your ass.
You know, don't get cocky.
There's just a lot of dead air in the middle of the movie, watching characters walking aimlessly through hallways until something happens. The attempts at suspense instead of mayhem fall flat. It's easy to forget you're watching a Jason movie a lot of the time, and not some random sci-fi channel original movie, especially when the film switches gears expecting us to believe a ship can blow up a space colony without also itself blowing up.
It's all right. We just overshot it. We'll turn around and go back.
So it becomes more a sci-fi disaster movie about getting off a doomed spaceship. Things pick up toward the end with the android chick going all Matrix, blowing Jason to bits, only for him to come back as the cyborg Uber Jason, but the film is over before it even gets a chance to begin.
Impossible!
Number 10, Friday the 13th, 2009. The 2009 reboot of the Friday the 13th franchise and the last film in the series to date was fine, just fine. It had all the necessary ingredients of Jason, kills, and like a lot of nudity, but it's a movie I don't go back to much because it just doesn't really have the flavor of a Friday the 13th film, the atmosphere. It was directed by the guy who did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake with cinematography by Daniel Pearl, director of photography on both the original and remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so it feels a bit like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie sometimes, which is ironic because the recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies feel like Friday the 13th movies.
Do you know how much money we're gonna make selling this weed?
We're gonna make a lot of fucking money.
Yeah, okay.
Apparently, the classic Friday the 13th music theme is heard somewhere in the reboot, but I have no idea where it could be. The reboot is just missing the vibe I go to for a Friday the 13th movie. It's hard to articulate, but the characters feel even more superficial and hollow compared to the 80s movies, which is crazy. The reboot is a slick, polished horror movie, but it's just very bland. It features an attempt at injecting more of a story into a typical Friday the 13th movie, featuring one of the guys from Supernatural trying to find his sister out in the woods.
Our mother just died of cancer, did I tell you that? No, sir. Well, she did.
But it feels a bit like it was added to give Jared Padalecki a vehicle to start a film career, which seems to have been a coordinated effort because the same year the other guy from Supernatural was in the My Bloody Valentine remake, but both their film careers ended up being non-starters, much like sequels to the Friday the 13th reboot itself.
Yeah, it's me. Obviously, I'm the one being a dick.
There could have been sequels for many years before the eventual current legal situation prevented them, but immediately after the reboot, there just didn't seem to be much of a desire to make another Friday the 13th movie. Even though everybody agrees the reboot was fine. Just fine. Number 9, Freddy vs. Jason. Whether you love the crossover or hate it, you have to admit Freddy vs. Jason is about half a Friday the 13th movie and half a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, give or take. So it's not gonna rank high on a list of either franchise.
I'll let Jason have some fun.
Still, I get a kick out of Freddy vs. Jason. I feel like it did a good job combining both franchises, even if it favors the Freddy side of things over Jason. Jason still gets plenty of time to shine with plenty of worthy kills. The problem with the movie and why there wasn't much of a future with its concept is that it approaches things from the narrow perspective of fanboys. What if these two guys fought? Well, you're gonna end up disappointing a bunch of people no matter what with the outcome. And there's also only so many stories you can tell about horror icons fighting. Instead, they should have approached this as purely a Freddy/Jason team-up movie. The two icons combine their forces to kill people, and you can add more horror icons teaming up with them in subsequent films, like an Avengers thing. I mean, we have dozens of terrible Marvel movies just because they're teaming up instead of just fighting each other. There's just more juice to team-up movies. Instead, we got a serviceable half Freddy/half Jason movie with a kinda underwhelming final battle. Number 8, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now we're strictly in the realm of the original Paramount films, and it feels right that the final one ranks the lowest to me. Jason Takes Manhattan isn't underwhelming just because it fails to live up to the expectation of Jason wreaking havoc in New York City, when in reality only a minute or two of the film was actually shot in New York, the rest spending most of its runtime on a cruise ship, but that does play a huge factor for why it kinda sucks. No, it also sucks because it features some of the lamest, most bloodless kills in the franchise, waving the white flag to the MPAA, with the only highlight being Jason punching the head off of Black Logan Paul over here. The vibe of Jason Takes Manhattan is also pretty off, and it might be because it came out during the awkward bridge between the 80s and the 90s. It just has more of a sitcom feel to it. Part 8 also adds some weird abstract dream elements that feel out of place as an attempt to compete with the Elm Street franchise, also tampering with Jason's backstory, seeming to imply he was a normal kid who mutated in Crystal Lake or something. The film also has probably the goofiest ending in the franchise, where Jason seems to turn into a little boy after being washed away by toxic waste. We've all had that happen to us visiting New York. Number 7, Friday the 13th, 1980. Yeah, the original movie ranks pretty low on this list. The first film establishes all the essentials of Friday the 13th, Camp Crystal Lake, the Harry Manfredini theme, and the gory kills courtesy of Tom Savini. But we spend a lot of the movie with the camp counselors aiming to reopen the camp, and they're as dull as dishwater.
You taught me how to use the emergency generator. Town power lines are supposed to be real lousy.
Emergency generator.
They're the most boring collection of victims you can write. They don't do much of anything interesting. We just watch characters doing things like making coffee for extended periods of time with no payoff. The movie kills time more than it kills people. Even when Alice is in danger, she approaches the situation in the most boring way possible, showing her pointlessly barricade a door, lifelessly shot. The only personality the movie has before the end is Crazy Ralph, who injects life into the couple brief scenes he appears in.
It's got a death curse!
There are some great, memorable kills in the first movie, but a lot of the kills happen totally off-screen towards the end. The original Friday the 13th is ultimately redeemed by the late Betsy Palmer's portrayal of Mrs. Voorhees towards the end of the film, the villain behind all the movie's killings.
You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him.
She seeks revenge against the camp for her son's death, and Betsy Palmer's frantic, insane performance is a chilling highlight of the franchise, followed by one of the most memorable endings in horror history. Number 6, Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. The New Blood was the late John Carl Buechler's chance to showcase his expertise at crafting gore, but it got fucked over by the MPAA. Still, New Blood has a great vision of Jason as a zombie and features Kane Hodder's debut, and best work as the character. Part 7 is also the start of the franchise's more gimmicky phase, introducing Tina, a psychic girl with daddy issues, but Tina's psychic powers work a little bit better than the gimmicks that followed this film, and makes for some amusing moments that keep the film from getting dull between Jason kills, which may be relatively bloodless in this chapter, but they're all still handled with enough style that it almost doesn't even matter. The final battle between Jason and Tina is not bad either. It's pretty much just a showcase for Jason receiving abuse in all manner of ways, and it's great fun. Number 5, Friday the 13th, Part 3. Part 3 was the franchise's only 3D entry during a short-lived comeback of 3D in the 80s, and the 3D is for the most part just yo-yos flying into your face, and every now and then an eyeball. Goofy 3D aside, Part 3 is an essential entry because it's the film that gave Jason his iconic hockey mask as a last-minute replacement of the bag in Part 2, because it was impractical, but Jason's look in the third film is what I think of when I think of Jason Voorhees. Part 3 also has some great kills in it, even if they're a little wonkier looking for the sake of the 3D effect. It felt like the 3D really created constraints on what the production of the third film could manage, but there's a charm to the hokier looking effects in Part 3. I can say the same for the characters in Part 3, who feel like an odd assortment of people, especially the Cheech and Chong couple. It's like full-on Scooby-Doo with the van, too, damn. You even get some bikers thrown into the bloody mix. The standout of the cast is, of course, Shelley, not just because he's the poor sap who ends up giving Jason the hockey mask, but because we follow the pathetic nerd's tragic story arc across the whole film. You almost root for the guy getting laid before he dies, but these films are strictly based in reality.
Nice makeup job.
Part 3 has a fun, laid-back tone, but I just wish Jason didn't spend most of the movie chilling out in a barn. Wish he was a bit more proactive is all. Number 4, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. New Beginning is a controversial entry into the franchise because of its twist, but if you ignore how nonsensical the ending is, it's the most Friday the 13th-y of all the Friday the 13th films, with some of the goriest kills and sleaziest scenes.
It's showtime!
It doesn't hold back on what it sets out to be. You don't have to imagine the cocaine the makers of this film were on. They just show one of the characters snorting it.
Sunny in the valleys and snow flurries up your nose.
Part 5 is a wild movie with some great kills, but it's held back by its characters a bit. They're just all pretty unlikable and unpleasant for the most part, which is great for when they die, but spending the time with them up to that point is rough.
You don't set a place for a dead person.
I said I was sorry!
The main character is Tommy Jarvis, who is traumatized by his encounter with Jason in Part 4, so he's not exactly charismatic.
So you didn't know that, huh?
Is that what they call us?
But he could have had more pathos to him that makes you care about him. But he's cold throughout the film, kept at arm's length from the audience because he's the red herring you're meant to believe is the killer of the film. But there are some great highlight characters that inject some life into the movie between kills, like Reggie the Reckless and Reggie's brother Miguel A. Nunez Jr. taking a shit.
Oh, some damn enchiladas!
Of course, in the end, it's revealed the killer is a Scooby-Doo situation, where it was actually Old Man Burns, masking up as Jason to scare kids off the old Pinehurst property, by killing them. In retaliation for the death of his estranged son Joey, but Burns didn't get any on-screen revenge against the actual guy who killed his son. New Beginning was meant to be a soft reboot of the franchise, but they went about it in a pretty jarring way and just ended up bringing Jason back anyway in the sequel. Number 3, Friday the 13th Part 2. Part 2 is the first true Friday the 13th film to me. The original film just had a lot of fucking around until professionals like Tom Savini and Betsy Palmer arrived on set. But the sequels feel like a real movie with distinct characters, fun dialogue.
Welcome to God's country.
Interesting scenes, you know, stuff that should be in a movie. Along with kills, of course, which in this film were heavily influenced by Giallo films. This was also, of course, the first film where Jason was the killer. In this entry, he's a hillbilly wearing a bag on his head, which is spooky in its own way, but a bag isn't a unique look. But it works, and a lot of iconic aspects of Jason are established and found almost exclusively in Part 2, like the shrine to Jason's mother's decapitated head located in his shantytown shack. Amongst Part 2's strong set of characters, though, is Ginny, who is to me the best Friday the 13th survivor girl, a departure from typical horror heroines of the time as this scrappy, tomboyish child psychiatrist who is a fighter from the start of the film, a good match for Jason. But the movie does leave you asking,
Where's Paul?
Number 2, Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. The final chapter wasn't the final chapter really, but out of the classic 4 films, it's the best to me. It's got a good set of characters that have some fun scenes together, so there isn't a dull moment when Jason isn't around. I mean, you got Crispin Glover dancing like this, it's hard not to have a good time. Plus you have a more wholesome family thrown into the mix with Corey Feldman's portrayal of Tommy Jarvis, a kid who works as this unlikely mix of being the hero of the film and a representation of its villain's inner child. This is the film where Jason gets offed, so it's the last movie where he's human, and Ted White portrays the killer memorably as a total powerhouse. And Tom Savini returned for the second and last time to do Part 4's effects, and they're some of the best kills in horror history. There's so much incredible gore in this film, and it's capped off with Jason's greatest death ever. Number 1, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Jason Lives is my favorite Friday the 13th movie, but it understandably doesn't appeal as much as, say, Part 2 or 4 to some purists because of its humorous meta tone and its lack of memorable kills, but I love Part 6 because it's a fun ride. It's the first Friday the 13th movie that feels like it's actually a full-blown movie with, you know, a story, and not just some teens hanging out with a killer wandering around in the background, unbeknownst to them. Tommy Jarvis is reimagined as an Ash Williams-like figure who really fucks up. And Tommy has to go out of his way to undo the mess he's caused. It's more of a goofy 80s adventure with fun gags.
Does he think I'm a farthead?
And it does have some great kills here and there, even if it isn't a particularly gory movie. And Jason is at his coolest to me in this movie. He's like an undead anti-superhero with the yellow gloves and utility belt. It's not the darkest movie, it doesn't have the best atmosphere or gore, but it's just a cool fucking film and a lot of fun to watch whether or not you're into slasher movies.
Don't clown around.
I'm not the one with the funny red nose.
It's a different Friday the 13th movie, but it's still true to who Jason is, while taking him in a new direction, and I really wish they stuck with this approach. Well, that's my personal ranking of the Friday the 13th series. Very likely there will be many of you who will be bitching and complaining about my rankings being wrong, but hey, how about instead of being a dick, you share your own rankings of the Friday the 13th franchise in the comments below. And if you want more ranking videos, leave a like to let me know. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.